What is going on, guys? Real Touch GML here, back with another Java tutorial, and today we're going to be doing something pretty exciting today, and that is going to be collision, right? So I've gotten a lot of requests on how to do collision with our game that we're creating. So let me go and run it real quick. And as you can see here, our spaceships coming down, we can shoot, and everything is good. Now, basically, we're going to need collision in our game. Obviously, any game should have collision in it if it's a game. So I've kind of thought about the best way to go about doing this, and the way we're going to go about doing this, and we're going to do a couple more things in this tutorial, but that's going to be, it's not the most efficient, okay, but it is very efficient, so don't get discouraged by that. But obviously, when you create your own projects, then you're not going to have to go back and fix this, because what basically, if I do some sudo real quick, we're gonna create entity classes. Okay, so basically we're gonna have a class of we could have, say, class A, and then we could have class B entities, and then we could have class C entities, right? And class A entities don't collide with each other, but class A and class B entities collide with each other, but class B entities don't collide with each other. And then you can have as many as you want. So class A and class C entities, like class C could be like a wall, and if you go into the wall, it's going to stop you. Those could be class C entities. And class B entities, again, it could be enemies. Class A could be your players and all of your friendlies. So that's kind of how I want to do this. So basically, we're going to have to create a couple more interfaces other than the first entity here. Okay, but first off, what we're going to do is, if I went ahead and went into the player here, as you can see, we are initializing our X and Y variables right here, and I just want to kind of make that a little bit easier. I'm going to create a new class real quick, and I'm going to call it game object. Okay, and in here I'm going to say public double X and Y, and then I'm just going to create the constructor double X and double Y, and then this dot X equals X, this dot Y equals Y. Okay, and if we just create that and we go into our player here and we extends that game object, and now we can delete this X and Y and just in here say super X Y. So now we won't have to have those variables, and we're basically using the, where did the game object go? Right here. We're basically using these variables for every single player and enemy, bullet, all of that stuff. So super X and Y, again, super just refers to the super class, which is our game object, and that refers to the constructor, which sets our X and Y variables. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that for our enemy. So extends game object. Get rid of this. Super X and Y. So this has nothing to do with the collision right now. I'm just doing this. Okay, so bullet extends game object, and there we go. So this is good, actually, because now you have actually seen a couple methods of doing the same thing. So again, setting coordinates, and this is just a little bit more efficient way of doing it. Alright, so there we go. Now we have the game object extending all of our positions, and as you can see, if we run the game, it runs exactly the same. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we are going to set up collision. Okay, now this, in the beginning, it could be a little difficult to sort of wrap your mind around, but basically what we're doing is we're using rectangles to find if there's a collision. So basically, if I open up Paint here, and if I draw a rectangle right here, okay, we're basically going to map a rectangle around our player. So say this is our player right here. Hello, there we are. Okay, and we're going to map a rectangle that you cannot see around our player. And basically, say this is the spaceship here, and let's just create a spaceship sort of thing. That's our enemy. And basically, what the rectangle, why we use a rectangle, the rectangle class that's located in the JRE, is because it has a dot intersects method a dot intersects method that is already comes with it, so we don't have to do any programming there. Sorry, my words got jumbled up there. So basically, if we have here, the intersects method returns a true or false value. Okay, so if we have our rectangles here, they're obviously not touching. That's not an intersection. The intersects method will return false. But if we have two rectangles like that, it will return true because the corners are intersecting. Okay, so that's why we're going to use the rectangle method. All right, so that's just basically the pseudo on how we're going to do that. But for now, let's go ahead and create our different entity classes like I was explaining in the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this. So is there a duplicate? No, I'm just going to copy and then paste it. And I'm going to say this is going to be called entity A. Okay, I'm going to duplicate it. I guess I got to copy it again. So, and this is going to be called entity B. And then I'm going to duplicate this and say entity C. Okay, actually, we're only going to need entity A and entity B. So these are the basic classes. Now, what I'm going to do real quick as well is, first off, we can delete this entity, just entity. So now we have entity A and entity B. I'm going to create a new package for this just to kind of organize a little bit. So I'm going to go new package, com.game.source.main.classes, and I'm going to drag these two into there. So there we go. So now entity A and entity B are their own package. So now we get all these errors here because entity no longer exists. So here's where you pick what sort of class that object will be in. So for bullet, we're going to say entity A. Okay, and then you have to import that because it's in a new package. For enemy, I'm going to say entity B. And game, what do we have wrong here? Add entity. Okay, that is, we'll get into that. And then for our player, we're going to want to implement that as well. So implements entity A. Import that. So now our player and our bullet are entity A. So basically, entity A's don't collide with other entity A's, okay? And entity B's and entity B's don't collide with each other as well. It's just when entity A and entity B collide with each other that something will happen. Okay, now you can have this a different system if you want, like entity 1, entity 2, or you could even call it this friendly, and then you could call this enemy. Implements enemy, implements friendly. So if that's better to if you understand that better. But that's how we're going to be doing that. Okay, so now let's go into our controller, and as you can see, we have a linked list private entity E, and that actually no longer exists. So I'm going to say entity A, entity B, AB, AB. And we have to import that, and then we'll have to import it right here as well. So entity A, entity B. I'm saying entity a lot. No, I don't want to import that. What are you talking about? There we go. Okay. So now we have to sort of, we have to fix up what's down here. So basically, right here, this is going to be a class. So EA, 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 EA. Copy this, B class. So B, 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 and B. Okay, same thing right here. A class, A, and A. Copy this, and B, 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 and B. There we go. Alright, so now that we have all this, well, first off, let me just show you what all this is doing. So basically, we just made two, let me do that. Basically, all we did is we made two new linked lists here and just basically copied what we did from the last tutorial, which was just make an entity for everything here and then just run through all of the A class and run through all of the B class and render everything out right there. So this, we can say entity A, and we can copy that and say B. There we go. And we can use the same name here because the parameters aren't the same. So just know that. Alright, so there we go. We now have our controller fixed up and ready, and we can go to here real quick. And this would now work because now when it creates the enemy, it's automatically going to know to go with this one because it is already established that the enemy is a B class. Right? So right here. So it automatically knows to create this entity with the B class. Alright, so now what are we going to do? We are going to create a new class here, and this is going to be a physics class. So physics. And this is going to handle whether we have collisions or not. Right? And also one thing we have to do is with our game object right here, we're going to create the method and this is inside the game object. We're going to create the method of creating our rectangle around the player. So I'm going to say public rectangle get bounds. That's what I'm going to call it. And it's going to return a new rectangle, and we have to cast this to integers because they are double values. 32 by 32. So this is the starting point, and this is the width and height. Alright, and if you say you have a player that is 64 by 64 in width and height, but you have the enemy that's 32 by 32, and we're going to be using the same thing over and over again. So I can just say int width, int height, and this can just be width, and this can just be height. Alright, so now in our physics here, I'm going to say public static boolean collision, and the parameters in here, it's going to be game object geo, and then linked list entity A, ent A. Go ahead and just return false. And now what we're going to say is we're going to create a for loop real quick. Int I equals 0. I is less than ent A dot get, dot size, and then I plus plus. There we go. So now this is going to loop through all of the A class, and now what we're going to say is if go.getBounds with height, okay, so we'll just say 32, 32 dot intersects, this is the intersects method, and that's going to be ent A dot get I dot get bounds, and we have to go into our entity class here and just do that. So public rectangle get bounds, and we have to copy that and paste it right here. So for each class, and then go into the game object here and just copy this, paste it down for the enemy, and we can get rid of this width and height because we already know since we're in the class. So 32 by 32. So in my game now, everything is 32 by 32. You may have it different in your game though. That's why I'm showing you how to make it different. So there we go. All right. So now if we go into physics here, actually what I'm going to do real quick, I'm just going to say entity A. Or I'm sorry, entity, we'll say entity A, ent A, and then this will be entity B. This is kind of confusing. I'm gonna go through it again before we stop, before the video ends, just so I can show you exactly what I did here. And then ent A. Okay, and then we'll just return true. So let me go through this. I know I was kind of mix-mashing it together, you know, putting one part, then changing it back, so I know that can get kind of confusing. So basically, what we're doing here is we're going to call this method collision. We're going to check if it's true. So if it returns true, obviously there's going to be a collision that happens. So we're checking if our A class that we created runs into our B class. Okay, so for example, since our bullet is part of the A class, if our A class runs into a B, so that could be the enemy, then it is going to return true. Simple as that. Okay, now we can, yeah, there you go. Okay, so if we run the game, everything's going to run exactly the same. There's no collision that happens yet, because we haven't actually done that. So let's go ahead and do that. So in our player, or no, I'm sorry, let's do our bullet. In our bullet, in our tick method here, let's check for collisions. So we can say if collision dot, or I'm sorry, not collision, if physics dot collision, now entity A, we could say this, entity B, I'm going to get into in a second here. So we'll leave that for now. But this is basically how it goes. So whatever's in here is what happens when there's a collision. So we say this because entity A, we're talking about this bullet, runs into, and now we have to show the list of all of the entity B's out there. So to do that, in our controller, if we can go to our controller here, we're going to have to return our entity A and entity B list. So we're going to say public linked list entity A get entity A. It just returns our EA. There we go. And we can copy this and paste it for our B. There we go. Okay, so now we actually return the list with a method. So if we go into the game here, our game class, and we say private link to list entity A, call it EA, and copy and paste this, say EB, there we go, and we can call these public, actually, because we're going to use them. And we go into our controller here, and this needs to be before that. We're going to say, make sure this is after we initialize our controller, because that is, we need that to be initialized before we actually call methods from it. So we're going to say EA equals C dot get entity A, and EB equals C dot get entity B. Simple as that. And now we can go into our bullet here, and we can initialize our game, private game, we'll call it game, game, this dot game equals game. Now this is just an example. Now we just say game dot EB. There you go. So now let's just do a system.out.println collision detected, and in our game here Save this because in our constructor parameters we added something. So now let's run it. So as you can see, there's no collisions yet, but if we shoot it, look in the console, collision detected once it hits. There you go. So there you have it, folks. Now there's no collision for our spaceship yet, but we will get into that later. And now next tutorial I'll probably go into animations, but for now that's basically it. Go ahead and leave a like, go and subscribe. This was a long tutorial and I feel like I did not explain it well enough, and I feel like you're going to be very confused. So if you are confused, I want you to suggest in the comments section a follow-up video. Say, I want a follow-up video explaining more on this. And you know what? I will do, if there's enough of them, hey, even if there's one or two, I'll probably do a follow-up video explaining more about this, about A class, B class, and how this physics class actually works. So go ahead and leave a like, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you sexy programmers next time. Peace.